Hello, and so for this video, we're going to do just some more example problems with looping and functions. And with functions, we're not just going to do simple void functions and single value returning functions. We're also going to look at pass by reference in general and mix in some multi-value returning functions. So hopefully we'll be able to hit all those topics in here. And this first one is more of a program itself. So let's go ahead and try this out. So if you want to pause the video, take a look at this, try to come up with a good answer on your own, and then we'll take a look at it together. All right, so as long as you're ready, let's get started. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to really read this and make sure that I understand exactly what I'm trying to do here. So we're going to write a program which will display the following menu, then read a user choice from the keyboard, and then act on it. So a user choice menu, okay, so we have to create this menu here. This makes sense. So I'm immediately thinking to myself, okay, this is a void function that's going to print the menu, right? And then we get the user choice as a character, and we ask the user to enter their choice. So we need to structure the main loop so that it validates menu options. Pause and clear the screen after each user choice. So when the user enters something, we need to clear the screen. Pause and clear the screen. So case is not guaranteed. Capital E or lowercase e are the same. Do not use the C-type library. We had seen the C-type library used very, very, very shortly. So if you don't remember, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But the C-type library had the method in it that was two upper and two lower. So we could have just done a two upper. So our uppercase E would turn into uppercase E, so not changed at all. And if we passed in a lowercase e, it would return back an uppercase e. And that's a way that we can uh, validate case. I'm not too worried about if you wanted to use that in this example, but the instructions do say don't use it. We can easily get around it. It's not a big deal. So let's not use it. Uh, the three new statements, switch, for, and do while, should be included in your program. Okay, so let's switch over to the solution and see what we got. Okay, so first things first, I am going to code up the user choice menu because it's a simple void function, and we could just call it print user choice menu. It's a bit wordy, but that's fine. Um, and then in here, we're just going to see out our statements here, the E, add the even numbers between 100 and 90 inclusive. So this one we're obviously going backwards. Guess it wouldn't matter though, would it? And then O would be add the odd numbers between 1 and 10 inclusive. Quit. Okay, just like it has there. So this is the user choice menu. And now we can have another function, because I'm thinking, what are all these pieces that are going to go into this rather than making it all at once, right? So really quick before I move on to the next one, I want my purpose. So my purpose here is to print the options the user has, and the pre is none, really. It's just going to be written to the screen, and post the menu will be printed to the screen. Okay, now next, I'm thinking I need to get the user choice. Now the instructions mentioned that we need to use a switch, a for, and a do while at minimum. Um, And I'm thinking, well, we can actually use most of those in a function where we're just getting the input from the user, because the user is going to have to be able to input a capital E, a lowercase e, a capital O, a lowercase o, and a capital Q or a lowercase q. And those are the only valid options. We want to trap them in a loop until they select one of those possible options. And we can also use this function to guarantee that we're going to return the capital version of uh, whatever our input is. So we can declare a character get user choice. So with get user choice, we are going to, I think, immediately do while. Let's see if that'll work. Don't forget the semicolon there. And I need a character for choice for whatever the user puts in. And I'm going to say bool is valid. And this bool is valid is going to help me just simplify some of my logic here with how we're going to do this. So first of all, we're going to see out enter your choice, and then I'm going to add the colon because I think it'll make it look a lot nicer. Oh, and no end line. So then we're going to see in the choice. So this is going to allow the user is going to be able to type like right next to this, and when they hit enter, it'll go down a line. So it'll look really nice, I think, this way. Now we can have a switch case statement to validate this input. It's a way that we can do it, and it'll fulfill our need for having the switch case for this problem. So I'm just going to quickly type up all the options and then really think about what I should be doing. You know what? I did it this way. I want to do it the other way, I think, because it'll make less work for me in the end. So I'm just putting the lowercase on top of the capital, and then I have a default case. Okay, so if case it is lowercase e, I'm going to set choice equal to capital E. So we're just going to make it capital, and then if it's a capital E is valid, equals true. And then we want to break. So if the choice is lowercase e, we go down and we set the choice equal to capital E. That doesn't affect our switch case statement at all, so ignore this case capital E, but we just fall through and then we execute this line of code, which sets is valid to true, and then we break. So here, I'm thinking the exact same thing. We have a lowercase o. Well, let's set it to a capital O so that we can guarantee the case going out of this function. And then is valid equals true. And then break. So here we set choice equal to capital Q. And we set is valid equal to true. And then we break. And then for our default, we set is valid to false. Because that means that they put something else entirely. It wasn't a capital of any of those letters or a lowercase of any of those letters, so we don't care what it is. It's just not right. Okay. So there's my switch case where I'm validating the input. So let me document that right here. Case to validate user input. And then if I go down here, we'll have an if not is valid. So we're saying inside this if statement, it's not valid. We know that what the user input is not valid. So we can say choice is not a valid option. Please try again. And then we can say while not is valid. Okay, let's walk through this really quick, and then let's go through and document this function as well. So we declare choice, we declare is valid, and we have our do while here. So the first thing that we do is we ask the user to enter a choice. They input something. Let's say they input a lowercase q. So we switch on choice and we say, is it a lowercase e? No. Is it a capital E? No. Is it a lowercase o? No. Is it a capital O? No. Lowercase q? Yes, it is. So it'll go in and it'll set choice to a capital Q instead. And then we will fall through to the next line, which will set is valid to true. And then we will break out of the switch case. So we go out and around. And now we're at this if statement. And remember, we set valid to true. So if not true, that's false. So we don't go into the if statement. While not is valid, which is true. So nodding it makes it false. So we don't do the loop again, and we exit, which is exactly what we wanted, except we were missing one thing, so it's a good thing that we did this. We want to return the choice. So whoever calls this, they get the validated choice. And so when whoever calls this function, they're guaranteed that they're going to get an E, an O, or a Q, which is so nice, right? We just took care of all this in the function, and we don't got to worry about it. So the purpose is to get a valid input from the user, guaranteed to be capitalized. Just to make sure that I document that it's going to be capitalized. We don't have any preconditions for this one. We're not passing anything in. It doesn't depend on anything that I can think of. And the post is a valid and appropriately cased choice will be returned. Okay, I like this function. Now, let's take both of these and make our function prototypes really quick so we don't forget. Okay, so one thing that we really have to keep in mind here is that the instructions did say to pause and clear the screen after each user choice. So really, we just need to remember that in main, that after we call this get user choice, we want to pause and clear the screen. So first thing that we're going to do, I'm thinking that we're going to want to do a while loop, right? Because we want to check what the user inputs first. If the user inputs a Q to quit, we should just quit right away, right? So let's do that. Let's declare a character for user choice, and then we will do we'll declare a section here where we will declare variables. Just to be nice and organized about this, we'll print the user choice menu. So this will ask the user to select one of these options, and then we can go to get user choice, and let's store that in user choice here. Now we'll say while the user choice does not equal, and we can say just capital Q. And the reason why we can do that is because, remember down here, if they input a lowercase q, we set it to a capital Q. So we just made this a lot simpler for ourselves inside of main, which is the whole purpose of functions. So don't be afraid to use them like that. Okay, we can actually we could use a switch case here as well to say that, oh, if it's E, do this, else if it's O, do that. We already used our switch case statement, so I'm gonna do an if here, just because. User choice equals capital E. Then we are going to do the add even numbers between 190 inclusive. Else, really, all we need is the else, because get user choice will only return an E, an O, or a Q. And we're saying if we're in the while loop, we're guaranteed it's not going to be Q. And if it's E, we're going to go into here and skip the else. So the else is literally just the user must have input an O. So add the odd numbers between 1 and 1, oh, 1 and 10 inclusive. So these two statements here tell me, all right, we need to use for loops. These are both count control loops. Now, before I forget, I'm just now thinking about it. We do need to use system commands, and I'm thinking that we should do them uh, uh, right at the top of the loop here. So we can do a pause and then a system CLS clear screen. Just to, maybe we would want to put that into a function at some point just because it is a little funky having them here. But this way, basically, if the user inputs a Q, we'll just boop, pause the screen, and then return. And that seems reasonable. It does say print and clear the screen after, or pause and clear the screen after each user's choice. I think that they mean, and I could be wrong, I think that they mean only on a valid choice where they want you to do something because they want you to pause it, clear the screen, and then bloop. I'm wondering why we're not pausing after we print the messages, though. Maybe that's what we do. Maybe that's what we do anyway. We just, yeah. Maybe I was reading it wrong there, and it's very possible. That's the thing about requirements. You always need to be able to ask the person to clarify what they mean, and we really can't do that with these types of questions, huh? So, okay, at the bottom, we're going to pause and clear the screen. So this allows the user inputs a choice, we output the response, then we pause, clear the screen, and then we print the user menu again. And then we set user choice equal to get user choice. So just to tie this all back into our content, this is modifying the LCV because user choice is the LCV, the loop control variable here. If user choice is set to Q, we exit. So what type of loop is this? It's a sentinel loop, right? It's a sentinel loop. So really we could, and we probably should, have a constant here. I'm just going to call it sentinel value, but I probably want to call it like terminating character or something like that. But I'm just going to call it sentinel value. And this is taking care of our, well, if it's a Q, then we exit. Does it make it more readable? Maybe, maybe not. I want, because usually with a sentinel controlled loop, you would store it as a constant. In this case, I'm kind of 50-50 on it, but let's keep it. Okay, so this is our loop control variable. This is a sentinel controlled loop. So we say if the user choice equals E, this is the body of the loop. And then we have the pause and the clear screen. That would technically be part of the body of the loop as well. And then down here we have the modify LCV. Now the print user choice menu is not technically part of the modify LCV. At least I wouldn't consider it part of the LCV because all it's doing is printing out the list of the users. And this is where the actual modifying of the LCV happens. But I guess you could think of them as together, right? Heck, we could have just made this one function instead of making it into two, but I like to make very small functions if possible. So, okay, I think we're down to just making our for loops here. So let me do that. For int I equals between 190 inclusive. I'm wondering if they want us to count down. I'm gonna assume that they want us to count down. And I don't think that we've done that yet, so Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. We're just going to say for int I equals 100, so we're starting at 100, while I is greater than or equal to 90, because it does say inclusive, I gets I minus 2. 2. Alternatively, shorthand, the way that I'm going to do it, minus equals 2. So that this expression explodes into I equals I minus 2. Just shorthand, just like the plus equals is. So now all we have to do is we have to add these even numbers. Okay, and we're going to display them to the screen. Actually, I didn't say anything about displaying it to the screen, but we're going to do that anyway. So we're going to say an int sum equals 0. Declare that right at the top of our loop here. So this means that when we start the loop, we will declare an initialized sum right at the beginning. And so when we're in here, we're going to say sum plus equals I. And that's it. That's it. We've just added everything to it. And now let's do our for loop here. Int I equals 1. The odd numbers now. Okay, between 1 and 10. So while I is less than or equal to 10, I plus equals 2. So we go from 1 to 3 to 5. Okay, yep, that all works. Now we're just going to do sum plus equals I. And now when we get to the bottom, let's do our cout statement. The sum is, and then say I. Oh, excuse me. The sum is sum. And then we will pause, clear the screen, get the next choice from the user, and try again. Okay, so now we're ready to just start. Let's just run it. See if we get any errors, anything bad comes up. So if we run it, we're greeted with this menu, which is very nice. So EOQ, so we can enter, let's just start with the invalid. A. A is not a valid option. Please try again. Okay, well, what about lowercase e? Technically, it's a valid option, but should translate into the capital version. The sum is 570. That's right. So what if we do a... Oh, wait, gotta hit any key to continue. And it clears the screen just fine, and then we're back to the menu. So let's do a capital E. The sum is 570. Okay, so we get the exact same answer. And then O, lowercase o, 25, capital O, 25, same thing. Now let's try our Q for quitting. Press any key to continue, and we're done. That was easy. You know, now that I'm looking at this, though, I wonder if it would be just a little bit better. This is just a nitpicking thing here, but if I remove that pause, maybe we actually don't want it in this case, because if I hit Q, yeah, now it just exits. So if I do an E, we're there, an O, O, and then Q, we exit. Yeah, I actually like that a lot better. All right, so this was the final thing. I'll scroll through it one more time, really slowly. And again, this is not like the only way to do this. There are things that even now, after having written it, I would change a little bit. So your way is probably completely valid as long as you got something very similar to what I got here, and you made sure to include that you did a switch, a for, and a do while. That must be included in your program, then you're fine. Any questions about this one? This one was a beefy one to start with. Make sure that you speak with a tutor. Anybody will be able to help you with this. Okay, so for our next problem, we're going to take a look at this, writing a for loop. So write a for loop that will print every integer, that integer number of times from 1 to 9 inclusive, an integer per line. You should use the proper count control loop structure for this. Do not simply hard code your statements. So that was said at the top, so write a for loop, but just to reiterate, use a proper count control loop structure for this. Don't just write cout and get it done, right? We need to use looping. So the example here is 1 and then new line, 2, 2, and then new line, 3, 3, 3. So it looks like we have to go that number of times, print out that number of times. Okay, I think that we're gonna need a loop. Well, before I get to the starting to design the answer, pause here, try to figure it out yourself, and then we'll go forward with this. And if the instructions aren't too clear, if they aren't too clear, then let me just clarify a little bit and say that I believe that we're going to need nested loops in this answer. So take that as a little hint. So pause here, and when you're ready, let's go ahead and start to solve this thing. Okay, so when I'm writing this answer, my first thought is, well, let me start with just a loop that writes out 1 through 10, right? Well, 1 through 9, excuse me, inclusive. So for int I equals 0, while I is less than or equal to 9. Oh, wait, sorry, starting at 1. 1, 1, 1, 1. I plus plus. So we're going to go up by ones. So let's see out I in this case, and then just say end line. I know that this isn't correct yet, but let me start here, run this, 1 through 9. Now I just need to add a 2, add 2 3s, and so on and so forth, right? So one way that we can do that is, rather than just couting I, we can have another for loop in here. Now, be careful. I don't know if we've done nested for loops before, but and if we haven't, hopefully you caught this, that you can't have the same loop control variable in here, because then you'll redeclare I. So what we usually do is we just declare J, and you can have that be whatever you want it to be, right? But I'm going to make it J because this is standard convention stuff. And I will set that to 1. So I'm saying this is my first iteration of printing out this number. And then I say, well, while J is less than or equal to I. So now I'm looping in I into this loop test. So when we come in, initially it's going to be 1. So I is going to be 1. J is going to be 1. And then I say, well, what is is J, which is 1, less than or equal to 1. That's true. So we'll go in and we'll print it out. And then we will increment J. So J becomes 2. And when J turns to 2, then we'll say, well, is 2 less than or equal to 1? That's false. So we exit. And then we go to the next iteration of the loop. I is 2. And you can see now that I is 2, we will execute this loop 2 times. So really, all we need to do is just cout I. Yeah, and we can't have an end line right there. We can't have an end line right there. That's the important thing about this. We need to have our end line right here. Because this loop, what this does is it prints I number of times. And then once that's done, we need to print out our end line character. And then we go back to the top and we get the next number. And then print that out that number of times, and then output our end line again. Now let's run this and see if this works. Hey, it looks pretty good. Okay, so really quickly, just gonna run through the loop one more time. That this starts as I is 1. We enter into that loop to go into another loop where we set J equal to 1. Well, is 1 less than or equal to 1? Yes, it is. So we output 1. Then j gets incremented to 2, and we say, well, is 2 less than or equal to 1? That's false. So we exit the loop, and we go to this cout statement where we output the end line character, so we go to the next line. So we go back to the top. 1 becomes 2. Is 2 less than or equal to 9? That's still true. So we go down, and we say, we set j equal to 1. So we reinitialize this loop. So j is 1. So is 1 less than or equal to 2? That's true. So we output 2. And then j, which was 1, turns into a 2. And we say, is 2 less than or equal to 2? That's still true. So we output another 2. And then 2 turns to 3. Is 3 less than or equal to 2? That is false. So we exit. And we output our end line character to move to the next line. And this just keeps happening the whole way through. All right. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so for this last one, we have some code here. We have some functions, some pass by reference, some pass by value, and we want to determine exactly what's going to be printed to the screen when we run this program. So we've done these plenty of times so far, so it's the exact same thing. Just pause it, take a crack at it. Remember to write down exactly what the variables are. Make sure that you take note of the order that the arguments are being passed in, and always double check, is this passed by reference or is this passed by value? Okay? And don't let this trick you that, yes, we can do a function within a function, right? So when we call function 3, we're actually calling function, it ends up calling function 2, and then some things may get passed by reference that are also passed by reference, and that'll just link all the way back to the main variable. But if that's confusing, we'll take a look at that. Just try to get up to that one at least, okay? All right. Well, let's get started with solving this. So first thing up top here, I'm just going to write my val1 and my val2s so that I know that they are up top, they're with main, and that's how I will distinguish them. So val1 gets 6 at first, and val2 gets a 2. So we are here at the first cout statement, so we will cout val1 space val2. So I'm going to write that in red over here on my cout statements. So 6 space 2, and then an end line. So we're right here. Okay, now we're ready to go into function 1. And in function 1, we have int1 and int2. So let me just write those down. Int1 is passed by reference. So I'm going to get ready to draw an arrow. Int2 is passed by reference. So another arrow. And we're passing in val1 for int1. So val1, int1 now points to val1. And val2 is being passed in for int2, so int2 points to val2. So now when we look at this, we say int1 gets int1 plus int2. So int1, 6, 6 plus 2. So 6 turns to 8. Easy enough. Now we're done with the function. We're at the last line here. We're at the ending curly brace. So we're done. We exit, we come up here, and I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup because these variables would be destroyed as soon as we exit the function. To make sure everything stays nice and clean. And now we do our next cout statement. So we cout 8 space 2. 8 space 2. And now we go to function 2, and we are passing in, val2, val2. Let's see what happens. So we pass that in. What's down here is actually int2 is the first parameter. So don't let that get confusing. And it is passed by reference, so it will point to something. And then int1 is a copy. So when we look at our function here, val2 is 2, so we're passing in the 2 and the 2. So int2 is going to point to val2, but int1 is going to be a copy of val2, so 2. And then now we do int2 plus plus, so we increment 2 to 3, and int1 we decrement from 2 to 1. And then now we are at the end of the function, so we do our cleanup, so that decrement doesn't matter. And now we are done with that function. We are at our next cout statement, and our next cout statement is 8 space 3. Next, we have function 3. Now, function 3 is int1 space int2. It's going to be a little tricky to write out, but try to follow me. Rewind it a whole bunch of times, whatever it takes. Now, what we're passing in here, val1 is int1. So if we point this up, this points here. Now, val2 is the second one, so int2 points to val2. Okay, not complicated yet, not complicated yet. But then the first thing that we do inside this function is we call function 2, which has an int2. So I'm going to try to line these up. So this belongs to function 3, and this belongs to function 2, okay? And an int1. Now the int2 is passed by reference. The int1 is a pass by copy. So the first thing that we pass in is int2, which is this, which if we follow that is here. Okay, so really, and you can think of this either way that you want to look at it, really, this points here. And that's how I like to do it, but you could also be like, oh, well, this points here, which points there. This ends up pointing to the exact same location as this. Okay, so that's the first argument down. Now the next one is int1 that we are passing in by copy. So int1, follow that up, that's an 8. So 8 gets put here. And now we are executing, so we are executing this line. We are in this function, int2 plus plus. So 3 turns to 4. And then int1 minus minus. Remember, we got to stay in the context of this function. So 8 turns to a 7. And now we are done with this function. We are exiting. So we clean up these variables, the ones that belong to that function. And we are done. Then we come here. We exit this function. Now we are at the end of this function. So we go ahead and clean up these variables as well. And then we are done with this line as well. Now we're just doing the final cout statement, which is cout 8 space 4. And we're done. I hope that this was helpful. We'll definitely talk on Tuesday. If anybody wants to mention or suggest any problem types in particular that you want more help with, I can definitely come up with some problems for you. Just got to let me know which part of this is confusing, and I'll make as much content as you need to hopefully get all the practice that you need. Okay? All right, take care.